Welcome. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of May the 3rd. As some of you will recognise, this is our first in-person planning meeting for, I think, 2 years. A brief reminder to folks in the gallery. I thought we might have had a few more folks in the gallery, but to those few that are there, just a reminder that if you wish to speak, then we invite you to come to the gallery, to the podium. We don't allow conversations to and from the floor, just in case. I thought I was going to deal with about 50 people, but there we go. We've only got a relatively small number, obviously a select group. Briar, let me welcome Briar. This is her first committee meeting since she joined us as Deputy Clerk, and I'm delighted that she's here. I believe you've taken the roll call. And just for the benefit of people online, we have apologies from Councillor Pearce and Councillor Wheat and Councillor McAlpine. Councillor McAlpine may join by Zoom call, but he hasn't as yet. Moving then along to the approval of the agenda, would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Howes, seconded by Mayor Bailey. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Noting that we do have 3 items that were in an addendum that we received today. Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Agenda accepted. Thank you. Moving to item 3, if any member has a pecuniary interest, please bring it to my attention either now or at the appropriate moment in the agenda. Seeing none, we'll skip through then to item 4, which is delegations, petitions and presentations. We don't have any at this point of the agenda. We do have some a little later for individual items. Moving to item 5, the minutes of the last meeting. Would somebody like to move them to get them on the floor? Councillor Ferrier, seconded by Councillor Coleman. Are there any comments or amendments that people would like to make to those minutes? Seeing none then, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Item 6 is business arising from the minutes of meeting. Does anybody have any business that they would like to raise from the last meeting? Seeing none, we'll move straight along. We're going very quickly. So we're up to item 7, which is public hearings under the Planning Act to receive information from the public. And we have one item on our agenda this evening regarding 6 Maple Avenue, Burford. And again, as a reminder, this to the folks in the gallery, this is not a decision-making session, not this particular part of our agenda tonight, but we are looking for public input, and I'm delighted to see that you are here. If this matter does progress beyond this evening, the applicant will bring it forward through our staff, and we as council, or as this committee first of all, will consider it for approval at a future meeting. So at that point, I'm going to invite Dan. I think you're the planner for this one.
That's correct.
Thank you. Dan, you take it away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a presentation for information purposes only as an update for the proposal at 6 Maple Ave in Burford. Committee would be familiar with the site as this has been presented a couple times now. The subject land's being located on the east side of Maple Ave North, north of King Street in Burford, and has approximate area of approximately 1.7 hectares.
Excuse me, Dan, are you meant to be showing your presentation at this point? Sorry, I'm not seeing it.
Perhaps it should be available to Gary.
Gary's got it coming. Yep, good, thank you. Gary, is that will our viewers see this screen, the presentation? Gary, will our viewers? Yes, they will, thank you. Councillor Chambers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing Dan. I'm just wondering if you can speak a little bit louder and perhaps more into the microphone so I don't know whether it's just me or whether there's echo, whether everybody can hear or not, but I'm just having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I'm seeing people behind you saying the same thing. So, Dan, maybe if you move the microphone a little closer to you.
Absolutely. How does that sound?
Yep.
Good? Better?
Okay, thank you.
I'm getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know if anyone else can hear that.
He's a little close to the speaker there. So the only way to eliminate is to turn it down, which is going to cause some hearing problems.
Okay.
If you move the microphone closer to me, but also there like that, it should
Okay.
be fine.
How's that?
Good. Can
Okay.
people? Yep. Good.
My presentation is not very long, so I can do my best to do a recap. Again, this is just simply an update being presented for information purposes only. An update for the proposal at 6 Maple Ave, which is a rezoning application. The subject lands are identified on the screen, an area of approximately 1.7 hectares. The current official plan designates the property as an urban residential land use, and we know that this urban residential land use applies to primary and secondary urban settlement areas throughout the county, and it does permit various types of residential built form. The current zoning on the property is suburban residential. Just a bit of a timeline to catch everybody up on what has occurred so far with this application, as it has been ongoing for some time. You can see the dates and the various meetings that have been held related to this application, dating back to the application being received back in October 2020. It was first presented for information purposes to the Planning Committee back in December 2020, followed by a neighborhood meeting in April 2021, a second information meeting in December 2021. Most recently, as of last week, there was a second neighborhood meeting where the revised proposal was presented, and that brings us to this evening where the proposal will be presented again for information, and our applicants are with us this evening who can present the proposal in detail, much more detail than I would be able to provide this evening. Just as a recap, the previous proposal, as shown on the screen, was an application to rezone the subject lands to a residential multiple high density zone, or the RM3 zone, which would permit 2 low-rise and 3-story apartment buildings with a total of 80 units. The revised proposal is to rezone the subject lands to a residential multiple low density, or RM1, to permit the townhome built form, or townhome type of dwelling, specifically 47 townhouse dwellings on a private street. I've provided the breakdown of what parking spaces would be required on site, and I'll have the applicants present exactly how many spaces they've provided in this new proposal. The application is proposing a holding provision subject to a number of approvals to appropriately phase the development and ensure that the development can be adequately serviced by private storm, water, and sanitary infrastructure. And this application is subject to site plan control. So in terms of next steps, we have continued to receive feedback from members of the public through this meeting, circulation of this meeting, and the previous neighborhood meeting. Those comments have been included as part of the agenda this evening. They've also been circulated to the applicants for their consideration. Some common themes that have continued to be included in those comments related to the built form, the density, many residents feeling that the density remains too high, and also just the concerns with services, whether it be servicing on this site and the fear of this type of development encouraging servicing to come to Burford. And I'll allow the applicants to speak further to that. So following this presentation, we'll be looking to receive technical information to be circulated in support of this application, which would be circulated to staff, where we can gather comments, formulate a formal staff report with a recommendation, which would be presented to this committee adequate notice and circulation will be given to those members of the public who have shown interest in this application, and those members of the public who are located within 125 meters of the subject lands. That public meeting, a formal recommendation will be provided by staff and a decision from the committee. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Does the committee have any questions of Dan? Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. One of the topics that comes up, and I believe it came up in that meeting, the public meeting, is kind of a continued attention, interest, concern regarding the wastewater treatment, self-contained wastewater treatment mechanism for this proposal. I just want to clarify, and maybe we hear more about that from the applicant later, but from a staff review point of view, the staff review would include an analysis of adequate wastewater treatment. I just want to confirm that.
Absolutely, yes, it would.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Chambers?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you to Dan. Maybe two questions. The first question is, if anyone in the public or anywhere else for that matter has questions or wants to add information beyond the scope of this meeting or the next meeting or whatever, who would they contact and how would they go about getting their information to staff for their consideration?
Through Mr. Chair, any members of the public who have any questions or are requesting information can contact myself directly. To make it easier, they can forward any emails to planning@brant.ca, just to save them the spelling of my last name. So, or they could call me directly. They can always call the county office, whether it's calling Burford or the Paris office, and be forwarded to me directly.
And I won't spell it, but that's Dan Nemizniak that they would ask for.
That's correct.
They can spell it themselves, I guess. And the second question, which is more of a comment, picking up on what Councillor Howes has suggested about the wastewater situation. My recollection is, going back, that this site was one of the original sites that was under consideration for West Side Village back in the day. And this site was was discarded as a preferred site on the basis of nitrate loading. And there may be information in previous files somewhere in the planning division that would elaborate on that. Briefly, what it amounted to was that where Westside Village is now, and you know what I'm talking about when I say Westside Village, the ambient nitrate levels were very low compared to this site where the ambient nitrates were quite elevated. And the concern was that the additional nitrate loading would take the ambient levels above the provincial guidelines for drinking water of 10 parts per million. And that's why this was discarded in favor of the other site. So that information may be available in the planning files, and it may be available at Westside, but I think it's pertinent to the discussion with regard to wastewater considerations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrier, and then,
Thank you.
then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. Two questions. One, the quick one. Under the current zoning, what's the maximum number of units that could go there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the current zoning is suburban residential. The suburban residential lot creation, new lot creation requires, on private services, requires 30 meters of frontage along a public road and 3,000 square meters of area. So one would have to do some math to determine how many lots and how the appropriate road allowance with turnaround, subtracting that area. But I think when I did go through the motions, so to speak, with one of the residents, it was roughly five or six lots.
Okay, thank you for that. And my second question, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair. There's a piece here from a Barry Banks about some stuff here about crime-ridden and, you know, rentals making, that part, we get a lot of that in Paris too, even though Paris is mentioned as something being forced upon them. But the question I do have about this is, he has here a quote that says, "It's interesting to note that when the school closed, a young Burford area resident bought the school with the plan to convert it to a few seniors apartments, but council rejected his application apparently due to water issues." I'm just wondering if, when the analysis comes back, we could get some context about the previous application, just to make sure that we're being fair over time. And if not, maybe members of the council from that Burford area might have some context for us.
Thank you. Do you want to answer that question directly, Councillor?
I can add to that.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas.
In the years that I've been on council, there has been no application considered by council on this site. There have been various proposals that have been put to staff, but to my knowledge and recollection, there has never been an application turned down for anything related to this site. I could be wrong, but I think that the resident who has stated that may be confusing it with some previous owners may have had considered that, but there was never an application denied that I know of.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. Councillor Ferrier asked my other question. So, yeah, under the current zoning right now, six houses, 6 lots could be created there right now, which seems to fit in quite nicely what's existing, but we'll leave that for another day. My other question is through you to Dan. Dan, you talk about a holding provision, and you've put 4 conditions: MECP approval. I'm guessing that would be for the wastewater, stormwater approval, well permit, and then the phased approach. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by a phased approach and how it relates to the holding provision? Because I do not understand that.
Through Mr. Chair, the 4 points that you see on your screen are points that came as a result of comments from the original proposal. So certainly those are themes that we could look to carrying forward as part of this revised proposal. The revised proposal may not require a phased approach to support services. However, we'd have to confirm that through technical review or recirculation of this specific proposal.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm seeing, and this is under the revised proposal, was a phased approach, but you're saying that's brought over from the original one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions of Dan? Seeing none, thank you, Dan. We'll then invite the applicant, or rather the agent of the applicant, to speak. I believe Dave Aston is online. So I'll leave you, Brian, to get him into the right place.
Evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thanks, Dave.
Great. I'm happy to be part of this first hybrid meeting, and council chambers looks great, by the way. Let's see if I could share my screen. Can you see my screen okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bell, and good evening to members of the committee. I can provide some additional information to Dan's presentation. He hit the highlights of the revised proposal. And in talking with staff as it relates to the proposed development of the lands, and based on feedback received through the agency review, and in discussion with our client, Mr. Grover, we determined that it's appropriate to look at an alternative plan and present that. And through the discussions with staff, it was recommended that we hold a neighborhood information meeting, which we held last week, and that this information report come to committee, really for information to share the change in the proposal from what the previous proposal was, because we do see it as a significant change in density and form and function of what's being proposed on the lands. Dan went through the background from the start of the first pre-consultation in 2017. Our client's been working through this file for just over 4 years now. And there's been a number of touch points on changes to proposals with the density and form decreasing as really we've moved through time and received feedback through that process. From a policy framework perspective, again, Dan identified the lands are designated urban residential, which would permit up to a density of approximately 50 units per hectare, subject to criteria in the official plan. I just want to point out that the density is actually 28 units per hectare, 47 units over 1.7 hectares. So what's being proposed now is half of the density that was previously proposed, and just slightly over half of what could be considered as part of the official plan. I'd also like to point out that from a zoning bylaw perspective, the previous proposal was to rezone the lands RM3, which provided for a higher density in the zone, and that's been changed to an RM1 zone. So it's just a lower density zone within the bylaw for multiple residential development. And what's being proposed is a site-specific provision to that zone to set a maximum height of 10.5 meters, which reflects the current suburban residential zone. The RM1 zone would actually allow 12 meters if that were to be considered. So the original site concept, the original proposal was 2 3-story apartment buildings with parking in the rear, stormwater central to the site, and I'll just call it the waste management system to the rear of the property as well. The proposed concept is for townhouse dwellings, 1 or 2-story. We're identifying a maximum 2-story at the 10.5 meters in height, with a central stormwater management design approach, and then the wastewater treatment proposal remaining at the rear of the site as it was before. There's an internal road. There's been a shift in that road to align with the cross-section or the intersection across, and you can see that there's now townhouses fronting the street with a ranging setback from about 6 meters to 9 meters across the frontage. There's 147 parking spaces, so that would include the garage and the driveway and additional space. So what's proposed is 3.25 units per hectare. And yes, the proposal is still based on the private service approach. Just in context of some of the questions to staff, agree with Dan that there's continuing staff review on the analysis associated with the wastewater treatment or the functional servicing, and that will continue as we update the information to reflect the current proposal, which is a reduced number of units. The nitrate loading was certainly part of that analysis that was part of staff review and peer review. And again, something that I believe will certainly be commented on again. The phasing approach was based on staff comment as it related to the previous proposal to consider 1 building with the private services and a future phase potentially based on any outcome associated with the Burford servicing class environmental assessment. I can also provide some information. It was asked at the neighborhood information meeting with regard to permit to take water. We've followed up with our engineering consultant and have been advised that they don't anticipate that that would be required, as the proposed use is expected to use less than 50,000 liters per day. So the zoning and the proposed development comparison, what we wanted to just do is put the picture in front of you on the existing zoning, initial concept plan just for reference, but the revised concept plan. And so the second and the fourth columns really are what I just wanted to speak to. The number of units, what's proposed now is 47. Dan had commented, and I believe I also responded at the neighborhood information on what the current zoning would permit. We have an application before staff review and committee in context of an official plan and policies and the proposed zone change application. What's being proposed, we've looked at the setbacks associated with the existing zoning. So a street front setback 7.5 would be required. What's proposed is 6, but that's in one location. On average, the setback is 7.5 meters. An interior side yard setback, so this would be the interior lot boundaries. The requirement is 1.5 meters. What's being proposed is 6 meters. And a rear yard setback of 7.5 meters, and what's being proposed is just almost 28 meters. From a building height perspective, as I mentioned, we're proposing to maintain the existing zoning height, so there's no proposed increase from what would be permitted. The parking spaces I mentioned were well above what would be required. From a lot coverage perspective, it's under the requirement in context of the existing zoning, and the landscape open space is over the requirement of the existing zoning. So based on this comparison information, what we're proposing, we see as a scale and a fit. And again, I understand that comments may not agree, but we're looking at it in context of so some of the criteria and parameters of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. We just put together a bunch of a summary of questions that we've heard, and we went through these at the neighborhood information meeting. Some of them I've answered already as far as what's being proposed. Rental or condo, it's still under review, but there will need to be, I believe, some form of condominium, because there will be a private road that will need to be a common element component. The technical studies we talked about, private services are being proposed, and we are aware of the Burford Master Servicing Environmental Assessment, and that's ongoing and being led by county staff, and there'll be an ultimate decision on servicing options for the Burford area. Issues and concerns related to lighting, landscaping, and privacy. These would be items associated with site plan approval, where I can speak to some of them. With the building orientation and the parking identified in the central area of the site, and actually the removal of the large parking space at the rear of the site, we believe that the alternative proposal also addresses and minimizes impacts associated with lighting. For example, as light spill is not permitted to occur across property boundaries, and in this instance, the lighting will be focused central to the site plan area, or the concept, and there will be potential buildings that would provide a barrier to the light between the properties, or at the property boundaries. Property is not identified as geared to income or low rental be condominium or market-based project, and the condominium board and property management company would look after the site. Should it be approved and work through the site plan process and site plan agreement with the county.
Dave, sorry to interrupt you, but you are approaching your 10-minute mark.
Okay, I'm just near the end, Councillor Bell, so I'll speed up here. I just wanted to share some examples of what's being considered 1- and 2-story type dwelling units. Again, these are examples. There's been no design completed, but just gives some indication of what the thought has been for the type of development. And that really is the end as far as next steps. Dan had covered those off, and we look forward to receiving any input tonight, and we'll continue to work with staff to provide them with the updated technical information that they require for their review, and to respond to any additional comments that they may have with regard to the alternative proposal. So thank you for the opportunity this evening, and happy to answer any questions here myself.
Thank you, Dave. We will indeed hand over to committee. I realise I passed on Joan last time round, so Joan, I don't know whether you can ask your question to Dave or whether it was specifically to Dan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question for the planner, but I can ask that later, or...
You can hold it for later, that'd be great, thank you.
And so I'll ask my question to Dave if he knows the answers. It says that it will be a private road, and normally developments that have private roads are condominium projects. So will these townhouses be condominium? And my second question is, how many, with just over 1,600 square feet in each unit, how many bedrooms and bathrooms will be in each unit? And I'm just thinking of the number of people using the water and wastewater. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor. As I mentioned, I would agree that with a private road, there'll be some form of condominium because that road will need to be common element, and really so will the stormwater management and the waste management system. The units themselves could be held as rental units on the site, or could be sold. So yes, it will be condo, and anticipate that the units will be sold, but don't have the final answer in that context. With regard to the unit sizes and internal design, that's something that is still being worked through as far as a number of bedrooms and toilets. The size of the units would lend themselves to 2- and 3-bedroom type of units, again, depending on whether those are single-story or 2-story designs. And then the water usage is something that is being considered in context of the technical update to the report to ensure that what was previously designed for the 80 units continues to be adequate. At this point in time, initial response from engineering is that it will continue to be adequate, but that's something that will be confirmed and reviewed by staff.
Okay. And one more, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. The density, you mentioned you're reducing your proposal by 28 units. The official plan says a maximum of 50 units per hectare. And is that not in a fully serviced urban residential area? Aren't those numbers for a fully serviced residential area? That's my question.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, the proposal is reducing the number of units from 80 to 47, or 33 units, and the density to 28 units per hectare. Perhaps staff can comment on the official plan, but the designation is an urban residential designation.
Dan, maybe you could answer that question?
Through Mr. Chair, the density certainly considers full services. Sorry, can you hear me okay? Councillor Gatwood, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I guess I don't hear myself on the speaker.
We get the noise from up there. Go ahead.
So the current designation in the official plan considers primarily full services, similar to what you would find here in Paris. So in this case, we are working with the urban residential designation, and the ability to support development on private services will impact the ability to maximize that density. So we'll have to really review what the proposal is and how well we can service it on private services, and then that balance will allow us to determine whether or not development on this site is appropriate.
Is that helpful, Councillor Gatswood? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dave. A couple of questions, if I may. One is, the previous proposal, was that condo or was that rental only, or a mix?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Ferrier. I don't believe there was a decision made on the previous proposal either in the context of rental or ownership, but it would have been a condominium project as well.
Thank you. We're desperate need of rentals across the entire county. But another piece, my second of three questions, just to clarify from Dan's report, because there seemed to be a bit of a bump of whether this would be phased or not. So I figure I'll just ask you while we're here, would you still be considering the phasing, or would this just be under your proposal of one and done?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, I think once staff has had the opportunity to review, and if there's a need to consider phasing, I think it's something that we would still need to consider in context of the private services and how that would function. And we're also aware that work continues on the Class EA as it relates to assessing alternatives. So I think it's something that is still available for discussion with county staff.
You will if you have to. Okay. And what happens if we go through this, if you do get the rezoning and you do not get, as a project, the site-specific provision on the holding around water? What if it comes back and the private water piece won't work? What happens then?
Not supposed to ask questions through you,
Would you like me to
Mr. Chair.
rephrase, Mr. Chair?
If you need clarification, do ask Dave.
Okay, yeah.
So-
Councillor Ferrier, I'm just not sure. Do you mean from a technical response, if there's technical issues associated with provisional water and the wastewater system?
If that piece, we find out that what you're hoping to have happen there isn't feasible with this unit count, what then happens from your point of view as the developer or the agent for the development?
Okay, yeah, I think, Councillor Bell, thanks, Councillor Ferrier. If it's technically not feasible and doesn't meet ministry requirements or county guidelines, we would have to reconsider the proposal.
Any other questions to Dave? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank Dave for looking up the answer to that permit to take water question. So at this point, with 47 units, and that's what I thought, you would not need a permit to take water. My question is, how is that calculated? Do you go by number of units? Do you go by number of bedrooms? Or do you go by square footage of each place? Do you know how that's calculated?
Through Councillor Bell, I think I would have to get it confirmed, but my understanding is typical flow volumes based on the type of units. But I would like to confirm that with our engineer, or I don't know if there's any county engineering staff there that could confirm it. I believe that there's a standard engineering approach, and I'm not an engineer.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. If you could find that out. But just to be
Yep.
clear, though, that is a provincial number, though, correct?
Through through Chair Bell, yes, that is the provincial ministry number.
Because I know when our public works staff are looking at how many units that they can allow and do we have enough water, enough servicing capacity, I know we have our own calculations and we redid those a few years ago. But anyways, yeah, if you could, if you don't mind digging that up, I'd really appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions to Dave? Councillor Chambers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and through you to Dave. You did pick up on my nitrate loading comments, and I know you're a professional planner and a good one, and I know you're not a wastewater engineer, but I'm wondering if you could just comment about nitrate loading and your knowledge of what the status is with requirements of that.
Through Chair Bell to Councillor Chambers, I did have some follow-up with our engineer on the alternative proposal in context of their review as it relates to the technical reports that were submitted. My understanding is that the functional servicing analysis, the analysis that was submitted, was addressing the provincial nitrate loading, and that, in their opinion, that the reduction of units and potential flows would continue to meet the requirements, but that is something that they will be, or we will be providing a technical addendum as it relates to the alternative proposal in context of the number of units and the overall total flow and the calculation.
And thank you for that, David. I have a second question, if I might, and this stems from the public information that you and the applicant put on last week, and that's with regard to the setback from Maple Avenue. If you walk down the street or drive down the street, you'll see that on the east side of Maple Avenue, the houses are set back pretty much consistently with what I'll call the front of the school that exists there now. And I'm not sure what the footage would be, but if you look at your proposal, the second proposal, the 2 units along Maple Avenue are within that area. In other words, both units are completely inside what would be the front lawn of the school. And I'm wondering, that was an issue that was brought forward. Have you considered, or are you considering perhaps modifications to be consistent with setbacks that are existing along Maple Avenue East?
These are on what I...
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did hear those comments absolutely at the neighborhood meeting. And the response at the neighborhood meeting was understanding the location of the two homes that are directly adjacent either side to the property. I also commented that there are homes across the street and further to the north of the site that are set back closer to the street. I think there's opportunity to look at potentially increasing that setback. We have explored that, and certainly what I would suggest is in context of what the existing zoning would permit, which would be a house at 7.5 meters. That is something we could right now agree to set as a minimum, but it is a comment we heard and something that we are looking into and considering.
Sorry, forgetting this building. Thank you, Dave. If you stay with us, there may be questions coming to you from the public, and hopefully you can answer them. So at this point, I'm going to open the meeting up to the public, and I believe we have 6 people in the audience that would like to speak. And where I have a little sheet here with all your names. I'm just going to call you up in the order in which you're named here. So I'm going to start with Mike Robinet. And while you're making your way up, Mike, if I could just ask if you could give us your full name and address when you arrive at the podium. And to everybody else, note that there is a spreadsheet at the back of the room. If you sign up, then you'll be sure to get updates following this meeting. And for all the other speakers, please listen very carefully to what Mike says, because I'm going to ask you not to repeat what he says. If you do support it, please do say you support it, but please introduce new topics if that's possible. Thank you. Mike.
Good evening. I'm Mike Robinet, that's correct. And I live at 10 Maple Avenue. Sorry, Mike. Testing. Ooh, okay. Okay. I can't get these glasses right. I want to be able to see you, and I want to be able to read. So we're going to try, see how it goes here. Okay. Yes, I'm Mike Robinet, and I live at 10 Maple Avenue North with my wife, Gail. And we live just north of the property in question. And as the closest residents to the proposed development, we are the most affected by what is allowed to be constructed there. And I must say I'm not happy with what I'm hearing from the planner. I'd like to just step back a bit to the 2021 proposal. These two large buildings that would have had 80 condos, I opposed for several reasons, and I won't reiterate those now, but the main objection was that this was an inappropriate plan because the development would have been detrimental to the quantity and the quality of the water and affecting negatively the neighborhood and likely beyond. This is because the development had a resident density that was far too high. This would have been very problematic as we are on, as you know, a well septic system. I wasn't alone in my opposition. A petition was circulated that showed the vast majority of the nearby neighborhood and beyond were opposed. The plan was not well received. It just wasn't right for number 6 Maple. I'm not against development of the property. I've seen different owners come and go there. I think there might have been about 7 since we've been there. We've been there about 18 years now. And We got along especially well with Omar and the school that was there, the Islamic school. And they wanted to make a boys' dorm there and have the boys stay in this dorm. They were coming all the way from Rexdale, someplace out near the airport. And they wanted to have maybe 30 spots they were talking about, and they got refused. And it was because of the water. I don't know, maybe they didn't make a formal application as was mentioned, but I know they were talking about it. So at that time, I made 2 suggestions because I'm not against development, but they had to be in line with the limitations that the property presents. Now, these were my 2 proposals in a nutshell. Number 1, a complex of 40 seniors' homes. Number 2, single-family detached homes accessed by a cul-de-sac running up through the center of the site. The number allowed would be dictated by the county's housing rules. I thought 8 or 9 fine 2-story homes would work. That's what I thought at the time. Okay, now, on to the present proposal for 2022. I must state again, I'm also opposed to this. And it's the same concerns. The negative effect that it will have on the water quality and quantity. The current plan is for 47 townhouses, as we've been saying. The planner, it appears, this is the way I'm looking at it, the planner took my number of 40 from the previous proposal, the thing that I suggested. He took the number 40 that I had for the seniors complex and that I suggested in 2021, and thought as long as their number came close to mine, I would be happy. But my 40 and the planner's 47 are vastly different. And I'll explain why. It's much more than just 7 units difference. My seniors plan of 40 single-story homes would have a resident density of 80. That's 40 units, 2 people per unit, 80. Each unit would have 1 bedroom and be intended, as I said, for 2 people, a seniors couple. There wouldn't be a basement or any stairs, as these units would be wheelchair accessible. The doorways would be wider, and other considerations would be followed to make life easier for those with mobility problems. Each unit would also have a garage large enough for a car and storage of an electric scooter, because this is the kind of clientele the resident that I foresee living there. They're going to want to go to Foodland or someplace, and they'll probably want to have an electric scooter to get around the community. The current proposal for 47 townhouses would not be suitable for a seniors couple. They are intended for families. They would be 2-story structures with at least 3 bedrooms and include a basement. The resident density would be much higher than the seniors complex that I suggested. It's also possible several of the townhouses will have multi-generational family occupancy, which is becoming more common. I've heard a lot about that happening in Paris. Also, another trend that could increase the resident density is the converting of a basement into an apartment to rent, and so we will have additional residents in each unit, or not each unit, but some of them. So that's going to add. This, again, is a trend because of the expense of buying a home. A lot of these people that are buying these large homes are doing this to make it more affordable. The resident density of 47 townhouses would be too high. It could run, I estimate, between 200 and 300 and possibly more. This is very problematic. There are other reasons why, or for my opposition to the current 47 townhouse proposal, but my time to speak is limited. I will cover these in a letter to the county highlighting other flaws with the current plan. So as I said, I'm not against development of number 6 Maple North. It's been an eyesore. We've been living next to that for quite a while now, and it wasn't secured for a lot of that time. Teenagers and so on were getting in there. There was a lot of damage. They had thieves going in there and stealing all the copper wiring and all the copper plumbing. It's been problematic for us all along. Okay. So, as I said, I'm not against development. It must suit the neighborhood. Its neighbors must be agreeable to it and on side with it. I would like to add just a few words about my idea for the single-family, two-story detached homes that I would like to see. In 2021, I was told my suggestion for 8 to 9 such homes for that property was not doable. But now I know the number that it is. I heard it again tonight. I learned this from a question asked of the planner at the information Zoom meeting held last Wednesday, April 27th. When asked, the planner's response was 6. And this was without having the property to go through a rezoning. This development would be well within the range required to keep the resident density low to protect the water. Even if every house, all 6, had a multi-generational family, it would be less than the 80 residents of the seniors complex that I would love to see.
Through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, Mike, to interrupt, but you're just reaching the end of your 10 minutes.
Okay.
You can wrap up.
Now, such two-story detached family homes built on number 6 Maple North would be a prime example of residential infill in line with the existing neighborhood. Both of my suggestions, the seniors complex and the 6 homes, they're doable. I would support either one. The 6 detached single-family homes would likely be easier to complete. The reason is not just an actual construction, but rather the seniors complex would require extra planning and setting it up to operate strictly for seniors. It would be wonderful if somehow the Lions, who operate Westside Village Seniors Complex near the arena, could take this on, you might say, as an expansion of the fine operation they initiated. If this isn't possible, another service group, such as the Lions, might consider stepping forward. Possibly, the county could assist in finding an interested party if we were to go ahead with such a project. The way the West Side complex of 35 units is organized, a seniors couple buy a home from the Lions, and when they decide to move on to other accommodations, such as a retirement home, because of their needs are changing, their home is sold back to the Lions, who have a waiting list. The Lions offer the vacant home to the couple at the top of the list, and thus the process continues.
Mike, can I just ask you to draw to a close, if you would?
I'm almost there. Just let me read the rest. I know that I heard you say that the presenter, the planner, your 10 minutes are up, and that was about 20 minutes after he was speaking, sir. So please give me 2 more minutes. If such an arrangement can't be made for number 6 Maple, another possible path for the seniors complex operation is to have a developer construct the seniors complex and then sell it to a property management firm who could, rather than sell the units, operate by renting them to seniors. Again, we would want to have a list of local interested seniors that they would draw on. So I have some plans.
Mike,
These are my closing remarks, sir.
We must draw to a close now. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm bringing it to a close. 3 sentences here.
Okay.
So I have my plans. A profit could be made if they construct either one. The owner would make a profit and not have the headaches that he's had for the last 4 years in trying to get this property developed. Both of my suggestions would benefit the neighborhood and the community beyond. The fear of water problems would be mitigated because the resident density would be in line with the property's capabilities. The property's capabilities. It has to be in line. Burford would be proud of such additional housing stock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Does committee have any questions for Mike? Councillor Ferrier. Mike, if you just go back to the podium, I have a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mike, I remember your proposal previous, but are you a member of the Lions?
No, I'm not a member. I know some people like Vic, used to operate Foodland. And I know, they're a service organization. They do a lot of good. They've done wonderful work with the existing West Side Village. And maybe this could be kind of branched together, hooked together in some way. I think they've already been approached, and I guess maybe they're all getting older or something that's maybe not so doable for them. But no, I'm not a member.
So as through you, Mr. Chair, to the speaker, to Mike. So you're not a member of the Lions, and as far as you know, the Lions aren't trying to bid on this property with the current owners?
Oh, no, I have no knowledge of that at all. But I'm just thinking of what I would like to see there. Maybe I would end up living there with my wife. To me, the density would be low enough. I'm not a professional. I don't know. Maybe 80 residents is too much. But I thought, well, we'll go with that. And all the other things that are being considered, I'm kind of connecting it and, comparing them.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Councillor Ferrier. Next speaker would be John Waters. So if you could come up and give us your name and address. And if you could, as I say, avoid repetition, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I must tell you that a lot more people would be here if the conditions were different. There are a number who still feel unsafe attending and don't have the technology to connect up to the meeting. And I was one of them for last week that I couldn't get connected either, so I was bumping and grinding, and good thing you didn't hear me, because I couldn't get involved. I truly feel I am speaking for a lot of people, because of a lot of people I have talked with over the last 3 weeks. Excuse me. Council has numerous topics, concerns, and considerations, and personally, I appreciate your position. You have enormous decisions to make. 6 Maple Ave is somewhat a white elephant. The developer had a grandiose plan. If this were in a city with infrastructure, this would be a no-brainer. There would be little to no discussion. But this is a small village with no infrastructure. Private well, great water, I might add, we must protect. Do we wish to endanger our water supply? I must admit, I am not a neighbor of 6 Maple Ave. I didn't give my address. I am at 381 Maple Ave South. But it is in my neighborhood of Burford. Talking with many people with the concerns, this property is 4.19 acres. We have been led to believe that in the Burford area, you must need 1 acre of land, or almost 1 acre of land, to build a family home. 1 acre. So how is this possible to even consider the possible build of 47 homes on 4.19 acres? Doesn't make sense to me, and I don't know how it calculates with you people. Lessons have been taught us nitrate level in our drinking water is a problem if we had more density in population. Level in our drinking water must be protected, the nitrate level. Excuse me. The nitrate levels in our area will go up unbelievably if the concentration of homes was to increase to this degree per 4.19 acres of land. We need development, for sure, no question about it, but not this concentration in Burford. Other concerns, talking with many people, stormwater runoff. Yeah, you're going to dump all that stormwater that is leaking off of vehicles and penetrating into the soil and going into some area that they say they have a spot for the water to go. Yep, and where does that go? Directly into our drinking water. Believe it, it goes into our drinking water. It doesn't go out of sewage like you have in the city of Paris or in Brantford or whatever. It goes into our drinking water. How many of the 47 homes will be rentals? You know something? Going by some of these rental condominiums, apartments, and or whatever at the end of the month is quite an eyesore to see. And there are people that are living there that do not appreciate their properties that they are renting like you do your own home. I'm sorry, it does sound like I am targeting someone here, but you got to admit I'm not wrong. This is not a low or medium density they're talking. Our quality of water so far is good. Our water will be affected. Question: would any member of council or the developer move next door? Would they buy Mike Robinette's house when he decided to leave and live next to this proposal? Or would the developer? Not likely. What we believe needs to happen here. Council needs to direct staff to work with the developer to come up with a plan that will work on this 4.19 acres of land to help this developer with his investment. He bought this land at a very good price, especially at today's prices, because he bought it, 5 years ago. So if you consider the price he might have paid compared to what the price is today, he made a very good buy. And he could make a profit if he handled it properly and he doesn't sit on it any longer than he necessarily has to. And he's trying to push through as many homes as possible to make as much money as possible. And that's one thing we need to look at. To help this developer the planning department should help this developer become a good neighbor. I see this as a council staff. They work for the taxpayer, the developer, and the neighbors. We, the neighbors, hope you make the right decision. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Any questions to John? Seeing none, thank you, John.
Thank you.
Our next speaker would be Arlene Winter.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arlene Winter. My maiden name was Kosas. My mother and father moved to Burford in 1955, and I have lived in this village for approximately about 50 years. Now, I am more than 125 meters from the site. I now live on 10 Stewart Drive, which is a little bit farther. But I did attend that school when it was just the old school, right? I can see that the planner has come a little bit, right? He's come a lot, the planner of this. I know the planner, I know Lincoln Construction very well, right? They're out for profit because that's what businesses do, and you can't blame them on that end. However, it's not just the residents that live in that area, it's the entire village of Burford, right? We are a small village. I have an engineer friend that knows this village very well, and my discussion with him today was, Arlene, he said the nitrate issue in Burford is crucial. The sewage in Burford is crucial. We don't have all the facilities necessary to put this type of development in. We all want a development. Every single one of us want a development. I love the idea Mike had of like the lines, whatever it is they have there. I'm not quite familiar with it, but Bob Chambers mentioned about the nitrate level that was there. Was that an issue, Bob, years ago on that property? So they decided to go somewhere else. Is that what you were commenting on? So I don't know how the nitrate issue has changed when everybody is talking about it so much. Is there really that much of a nitrate issue if we put another 80 residents there? I don't know. There are so many unanswered questions here. We don't know if it's rentals, we don't know if it's condos, we don't know if it's this, and we don't know if it's that. Last meeting, it was going to be for our senior people, right? This complex. Well, I'll tell you, I got a bum knee and a replaced knee. Do I want to go up and down stairs? No. We just moved to 10 Stewart Drive one level because we are at that age that we are restricted, as Mike said, right? Is it going to be seniors, guys, or is it not going to be seniors? We don't have any of the answers necessary for anybody to make a decision on this. Every time a question is asked, well, it's going to go somewhere, it's going to report back to the council, and then we're going to do this. How can you possibly rezone something when you don't even have the answers to half the questions? And this has been going on how many years? 5? Right? And I figure it's probably going to take another 5. And, and it's a sad thing. I'm not saying that there should only be 8 single-family homes put out there. I drove by that area over there. I don't even know the name of it. It was nice. One-level condos, very neat, very well organized. I don't see anything wrong with that. I empathize with Lanka. They want to make the most money possible, best bang for their buck, right? But as the elected officials of our town, right, you have to be concerned with the business development of this village, right? You also have to be concerned with the people that pay the taxes in this and our input, not just 125 meters from there of the whole village. And you're right, this is not a really good turnout, but I'm another one that I couldn't get on last week to communicate, so I had to come here tonight to communicate. I am against this development here. I'm not against the development of it, but that excessive one I am. Water, sewage, rental, condo, kids, this, and there's just so much left to discuss. How can you possibly make a decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. Any questions for Arlene? Arlene, you have a question from Councillor Chambers.
Mr. Chambers, we go so far back.
It's not a question, Mr. Chairman, but I just wanted to say, if my mother was alive today, she would take Arlene to the woodshed for calling me Bob.
Robert.
So it's respectfully Robert, according to what my mother always wanted, Arlene.
Love you still the same. Glad you're feeling better.
Thank you, Arlene. Our next speaker will be Malcolm Grierson.
Dave has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, was there another question coming?
It's on Zoom. Dave asked him.
Oh, Dave, I'll come back to you at the end, if I may.
Please, thank you.
Malcolm, if you just give us your full name and address.
Malcolm Grierson, I live in Wilson Ave. I only have a couple of questions. How many households in Burford in the last 7 to 10 years have had to get a new well? We are one of them. And on our street there are quite a few And if you're talking about 47 townhouses with roughly 4 people per townhouse, 188 people all want to use water. Where's that water going to come from? How much water do we have? Is it going to last for another 5 years? 10 years? Nobody knows the answer to this, unless somebody can come up with something really good and tell me. Guarantee that for the next 50 years we'll have water. The other question I have, what happens if somebody buys these houses and decides to rent them out, as was already brought up? A lot of people, and I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people that rent houses couldn't care less. They pay their rent and they don't care what it looks like. So if it's a owner, occupier, then it's not as bad. I don't have much, that's about it.
Thank you, Malcolm. Any questions to Malcolm? See none. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thanks.
And our final speaker on the list that I have is Louise Halleck. Okay, thank you, Louise. Thank you. I think that's all of the names I know of. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to this matter from the public, either in the room or online? I'll ask a second time, and a third and final time. And sorry.
Before a decision is made, will we get the information of all these questions that were unanswered?
Let me come back to that, Arlene, if I may. Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to close off the public session, but I am going to invite Dave Aston back to answer any questions he thinks he can answer right now, and the balance of the questions we will provide answers to via staff to people that have attended this meeting, as long as we have the answers. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. I have responses to quite a few of them, and some of them I agree as far as additional information in the staff response. But just a few I wanted to respond to. Number one, since the last meeting, and I did recognize it on the staff presentation and perhaps maybe in ours, the reference to Lanka as a developer, that has changed. Lanka is no longer involved in the project as a developer. The current landowner is who we're working with, and I believe many of the people know our client and the landowner in the community. And I just thought that was important to share because they're dealing with a member of their community, and in context to the comments related to the developer. I wanted to share that because I think that does make some difference.
Dave, may I ask if you're in a position to share who the new owner of that property is?
The owner is Mr. Grover.
Thank you.
Has always been the owner. He had been working with Lanka, and now it's just we're working directly with him. I wanted to clarify a couple things as well. There's some comments and questions raising the number of residents and people. I went back to the county's recently completed municipal comprehensive review, and I looked at the projected people per unit for townhouse developments, and it's 2.8 people per unit. So what's being proposed at 47 units would result in 132 residents based on that background information that the county is relying on as it relates to their municipal comprehensive review. So I thought that was something to share because it seemed to come up quite a bit. With regard to the questions on ownership and why should consideration be given to zoning if we don't have answers on ownership, I would just like to share that the proposal is for zoning. The use of the land for townhouses is what's being asked in context of the change to the zoning bylaw. Details associated with ownership or condominium, all of those follow a decision on the land use. And as I mentioned, it's likely to be some form of condominium, just given the nature of the common elements that are required for the development to function. And so that aspect of it is part of future consideration. The zoning doesn't zone for ownership, and it also doesn't zone for who would be purchasing the units. Either it talks about the use and the setbacks and regulations associated with the land. So when there was discussion on the type of the units and there were some assumptions being made, I wrote down some of the considerations. For example, are there basements or no basements? And as I mentioned early on, there could be a mix of bungalow or single-story and two-story units, which would provide for a mix of people potentially purchasing for any range of need. And housing choice, housing need is an important component of considering what's required overall in the county from a housing perspective. So I hope that helps with some of the questions and clarification on some of the comments, and just again made some notes here. We'll be circling back on our end, and we'll be working with county staff to provide the additional technical information in support of the alternative proposal.
Thank you, Dave. So at this point, I'm going to pass the matter back to committee for consideration. Would somebody like to move a motion? Councillor Coleman? Move to receive? Seconded by Mayor Bailey. All those in favour? Thank you. So for the public, this matter will now go back to staff. They will take on board all of the commentary that we've heard tonight, plus any work that the staff is doing, any work that the applicant is doing. And if there is a firm proposal along these lines, that will come back for consideration by this committee at a future date. I'm going to call this matter closed now and move on in the agenda. Thank you to the folks from Burford for coming this evening. Appreciate it. I'll move then on to item 8 in the agenda, which are public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. And tonight we have 4 items. The first item is 128 Biggers Lane, and I think Jessica is speaking on behalf of us.
Sorry. No worries. If I plug in from here.
So plug it into.
You good to go? So, have I got the controls in the drawers? I've got Tango. Oh, this one. Yeah. So you want it on or off?
Oh, yeah. My hands.
Okay, I think we better let Jessica do her stuff. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair Bell. Hopefully everyone can hear me correctly, and I'm going to try and toggle 2 screens, so please bear with me. So I'm here this evening at Planning and Development Committee to present application ZBA 1022JK. It's on behalf of the Corporation of the County of Brant, and it's to address a rezoning to facilitate the planned expansion for the Biggers Lane landfill. So the proposed subject lands, the application is to propose to rezone the subject lands from special exception agricultural A-9 to energy and waste industrial M4 and natural heritage NH to facilitate an expansion of Biggers Lane landfill in accordance with the Environmental Assessment Act, EAA, submitted to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP. An environmental assessment EA was undertaken for the planned landfill expansion. Public consultation formed part of the EA process, and it is since closed. The EA confirmed the need for expansion of the existing landfill on the subject lands. This application seeks to align the zoning of the subject lands with the intended waste disposal use, reflect ministerial approval of the EA, and facilitate environmental compliance approval ECA, which is the next step in the EAA process. The subject lands are currently designated agricultural and natural heritage within the current County of Brant official plan 2012. The agricultural designation allows for development of non-agricultural uses if compatibility with surrounding agricultural uses can be demonstrated. Assessment of potential impacts of the planned expansion of the landfill on surrounding agricultural area did form part of the land use agricultural study report submitted as part of the EA submission to the ministry. Under the County of Brant zoning bylaw 61-16, the lands are zoned special exception agricultural A-9, energy and waste industrial M4, and natural heritage NH. Lands to the north, known as 108 to 128 Biggers Lane, are to be zoned energy and waste industrial M4 through this application to accommodate the planned expansion and existing landfill. Lands to the south are to be zoned energy and waste industrial M4 and natural heritage to reflect the existing and proposed infrastructure, being stormwater management ponds. No active land filling activity is to occur on the southern land holdings. Lands to the east will remain zoned special exception agricultural A-9 through this application. All applicable development standards of the zoning bylaw have been reviewed and satisfied through this application. In my opinion, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and the County of Brant official plan, as well as the County of Brant zoning bylaw 61-16. I am therefore recommending approval of the application. This concludes my remarks. Myself and Matt DeHaan, Solid Waste Wastewater Operations Manager, are in attendance this evening to answer any questions of committee or the public on this application. Matt is online virtually. Thank you, and thanks to committee.
Sorry, this is one of those strange applications where we don't actually have a separate applicant. You are both staff and you are the applicant this evening. So I'm going to ask if the committee has any questions of either the staff or the applicant. Joan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Ms. Kitchen, I was pleased to read online that we got our approval from the ministry, so that's great news for our landfill. And the buffer zone, I was looking at the maps, and it didn't indicate along Biggers Lane what the distance is between the actual line for the new expansion and the road. Can anyone answer that? I'm just asking about buffer zones because in the visibility impact analysis report that's online, it stated that the visibility is not going to be the greatest. And I want to suggest that we plant trees next year on Earth Day in the buffer areas along Hagan Road and Biggers Lane and the westerly boundary with the Edie Farm, because this will give the trees time to grow before the landfill starts stacking up. I did get comments about the current section from neighboring residents. They call the other part of the landfill Mount Cockshut. And landfills tend to get tall, and you could see it from Cockshut Road. That's why they named it that. And 30 years ago, I helped the Cubs and the Beavers plant trees at the current landfill as a buffer for the more southerly part. I think you can see some of those trees on the overhead mapping. And so I would like to add that, or I can do a separate motion, Mr. Chair, if you wish, to plant more trees in those areas I've mentioned.
Maybe Jessica could answer the question. Maybe that's already considered. Jessica?
Right. And will the 19 new locations for the drilling wells, or the monitoring wells that have been drilled, will they be monitored the same number of times per year as the existing monitoring wells? And maybe that's more of a question for Matt, or unless you have an answer.
Through you, Chair Bell, to Councillor Gatward. So those are some great questions, and you are correct. Matt DeHaan is with us this evening, so I'm going to ask him to probably address some of those questions and comments.
Thank you.
Good evening, committee. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yeah, a bit muffled, Matt. You might want to speak up.
Okay, better now?
Yeah.
Okay, through you, Chair, and to Councillor Gatward's questions. With regards to tree planting and sightlines, you'll be happy to know we're already working with the GRCA, and we are doing tree plantings this spring. If you drive out along Biggers Lane Road right now, you will see we've already planted 2 rows of potted stock trees, which are about 2 to 3 feet high. And then there is another 5 rows of seedlings going in behind those. And those will be fully along the frontage of Biggers Lane, along Civic number 108, and also along the north property line between the county property and the property to the north, which is the Edie's farm, and a bit also on the east side of that property there. And with regards to the offset to the landfill cell, now just from the conceptual plan that was designed through the EA, we're about 100 meters from property line to the eastern or western edge of the cell, but there still does need to be the detailed design of where that cell footprint ends up. We wouldn't be coming any closer than that, but we may be a little bit farther away at this time.
100 meters. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
And then with regards to Councillor Gatward's question about the monitoring program, that also does get developed through the detailed design, but the majority of the wells that were installed for the environmental assessment project would stay in place and be monitored on it will probably be the same frequency as the current monitoring program.
Okay, thank you. And this is one last quick question for Jessica. In a number of the reports, they talk about the unnamed creek, I must have read that 50 times. The unnamed creek, and Matt is probably familiar with the unnamed creek. And I think we should name that creek. I have a suggestion, but I'm not going to suggest it right now. But I can always email
I think there's an opportunity to have a conversation with staff about that and have them bring it forward. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Jessica or to Matt? Councillor Miller?
Just well, maybe a simple question. You mentioned about the south part of it. How big is that buffer on the south end of it? It looks like, looking at it, it looks pretty wide.
Through you, Chair Bell, to Councillor Miller, I would have to defer to Matt DeHaan to get a specific measure. I know that the detailed plan designs, as he had mentioned, are not yet completed, but Matt, I welcome any information that you might be able to share.
I don't have that number offhand right now, but I'm going to say from the south of the current landfill cell to the closest point of the neighboring property to the south of that would be in the order of 250 meters. But I can follow up with you, Councillor Miller, to let you know exactly.
That's fine. But just to be clear, that's not a planning matter. I mean, you have that buffer because that's that's what the province says, that through the technical studies, that's what you need that buffer, is that correct? In other words, we can't make it a little bit bigger?
So with regards to the new landfill will be a fully lined landfill, unlike the current existing landfill, which is treated through natural attenuation of the underlying soils. So right now, with that being a lined landfill, we could be actually a lot closer to the property line if we wanted to be, but we do have the benefit of actually owning a good sized property and keeping it as far as we can away from our property lines to allow for sightline issue concerns and to keep it well on our property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Matt. Any further questions? If not, I'll open this matter up to the public. I understand there's nobody online that wishes to speak. I don't believe there's anybody in the room that wishes to speak, but I will ask a second time, just in case somebody online wishes to speak. Seeing none, I'll ask a third and a final time. Seeing none, I'll close the public part of this meeting and pass the matter back to committee for a decision. Councillor House?
I move to approve the staff recommendation.
Seconded by Councillor Ferrier. Thank you. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Moving along, the next item is 343 Blue Lake Road, and Shannon, I think you're on this time, and you're going to be staying there for the next three items. I can't switch that one off. I have no idea how that one gets off. But if I throw this at it, you might knock it out. Yeah, a gun, I think, just... So I think that we're actually learning a few things as we go along this evening about continuity of this kind of meeting, so bear with us. You ready to go, Shannon? Okay, over to you.
Okay, well, good evening, Council, and well, there's no more members of the public, but actually maybe online, and members of the public. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 343 Blue Lake Road from Trevor Hawkins on behalf of the owner, Chris Martin, within the former township of South Dumfries, and was required as a condition of the surplus farm dwelling severance application B7521SL. And bear with me, I'm also toggling two screens over here. So the subject lands are located on the north side of Blue Lake Road and on the south side of Scenic Drive. The subject lands have an area of approximately 57.2 hectares and a frontage of approximately 189 meters along Blue Lake Road. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the retained lands from agriculture to agriculture with site-specific provision 184, so it'll have the zone code A-184, in order to prohibit a dwelling and to permit a reduced frontage of 135 meters, whereas 150 meters is required. The proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The subject lands are designated agriculture and natural heritage within the County of Brant official plan, and in my opinion are in conformity with the official plan, as the retained lands will continue to be farmed as part of a larger farming operation. No new residential lot is being created. The severed and retained parcels have frontage along Blue Lake Road, and the MDS formulae has been satisfied. The subject lands are currently zoned as agriculture and natural heritage within the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. Only the portion zoned as agriculture will be rezoned with the site-specific provision A-184 to prohibit a dwelling and to recognize the deficient frontage of the retained farm parcel. The portion of the lands that are zoned natural heritage will remain zoned as such, as a dwelling is not permitted on lands that are zoned natural heritage. The retained lands are maintaining the intent of the development standards for lands zoned as agriculture, and in my opinion, thereby meeting the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. At the time of writing the report, 2 comments from 360 Blue Lake Road were received, just asking to be kept informed of any development on the subject lands. In my opinion, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, in conformity with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, conforms to the County of Brant official plan, and meets the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. I am therefore recommending approval of the rezoning application. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. Does the committee have any questions of Shannon? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the planner. Just to be clear, access to this is off of Blue Lake Road, not Scenic Drive?
Through the chair to Councillor, so sorry, I can't see your name. Yes, access is off of Blue Lake Road.
Okay. Just because I was just looking at Scenic Drive, it looks like they could get there, but it would go through a natural heritage, so I just want to confirm. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. If there are no further questions to Shannon, thank you very much. I'll then invite the applicant or the agent of the applicant. I believe we have Kate Wills and Rachel Neisser online, and if they'd like to introduce themselves, and if they want to make a presentation, please do so.
Thank you, Chair Bell. So good evening to the committee and members of the public. My name is Rachel Neisser, and I'm here with Kate Wills from MHBC on behalf of the applicant, Chris Martin, owners of the lands municipally known as 343 Blue Lake Road in the County of Brant. I'd like to thank Shannon for her presentation of the project. I would just like to highlight that no development is proposed on the lands, as they are part of a larger farming operation. I have reviewed the staff report, and I agree with the recommendations of county staff. Kate and myself are here if anyone has any further questions regarding the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Does committee have any questions of the applicant, or the agent rather of the applicant? Seeing none, if you just stay with us until we get through the next portion. The next portion will be the public part of this meeting. Do we have anybody online for this? There is nobody online that wishes to speak. There is nobody in the room that wishes to speak, so I'm going to go quickly through second and third requests since there is nobody there. And I'll close the public part of this meeting and pass the matter back to committee for a decision. Mayor Bailey. And seconded by Councillor Coleman. Thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you, Shannon. We'll move right along with you then to the next item, which is 24 and 28 River Road.
This is a zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 24 River Road from J.H. Cahoon Engineering Ltd. on behalf of owner Paul Stichter within the former township of Brantford, and was required as a condition of severance application B5221AW. The subject lands are located on the north side of River Road, east of the Cockshut Road and River Road intersection. The subject lands have an area of approximately 6.9 hectares and a frontage of approximately 103.2 meters. With the addition of the severed parcel from 28 River Road, the benefiting parcel, being 24 River Road, is expected to have an area of approximately 7 hectares. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the lands severed from 28 River Road from rural residential to agriculture, and to rezone the benefiting parcel at 24 River Road from agriculture to agriculture with a site-specific provision 185 for the zone code of A-185, in order to permit an undersized farm parcel with an area of approximately 7 hectares, whereas a minimum of 40 hectares is required. The proposed rezoning application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The subject lands are designated rural residential, agriculture, and natural heritage within the County of Brant official plan. The lands to be merged are designated as agriculture. No new designation is being sought. The existing residential use is permitted on 24 River Road. The subject lands will continue to be used for residential purposes, and no new residential building lots are being created. Therefore, in my opinion, the application conforms to the County of Brant official plan. The lands to be severed from 28 River Road are zoned as rural residential and are to be rezoned to agriculture in order to be merged with 24 River Road. The benefiting parcel at 24 River Road is to be rezoned from agriculture to agriculture with site-specific provision 185 for zone code A-185 in order to recognize an undersized farm parcel. All other development standards are being satisfied for the agricultural zone for 24 River Road and the rural residential zone for 28 River Road. In my opinion, it is meeting the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. At the time of writing my report, no public comments had been received. In my opinion, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, in conformity with the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, conforms to the County of Brant official plan, and meets the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. I am recommending approval of the rezoning application. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shannon. Does the committee have any questions of Shannon? Councillor Moore?
Just a question of clarification here, Mr. Chair. The lands, like you said, that the parcel with that added piece will be 7 hectares. Is that correct? Piece will be 7 hectares. Is that correct?
The parcel being severed from 28 River Road is just under a hectare, and it's being added to 24 River Road, which will make it approximately 7 hectares.
Yeah, okay. But just to be clear, the bulk of that, though, is natural heritage, looking at the map.
Yes, the back half, correct.
So I know it's not specific to zoning and planning for this, but we may see other parcels come along, smaller parcels. What kind of farming is going on there now, do you know?
Right now, the lot is being used for residential purposes. The reason why this rezoning was requested is because it's to facilitate a boundary or a lot line adjustment, and the services for 24 River Road were located on 28 River Road.
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
But we're considering it agriculture, but at this moment, there's no agriculture going on that you're aware of. Is that correct? Okay.
If there are no further questions, thank you, Shannon. We'll invite the applicant and the agent of the applicant. I think both are online. I don't know which order they're going to speak in. Bob, I'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Bob Phillips from J.H. Cahoon Engineering Limited. I think the application's pretty straightforward. It's kind of a technical amendment about a small severed sliver that's being added, and this just straightens out the zoning. And other than maybe answering any questions, I don't have anything further to add.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Would Mr. Stickter like to say anything?
No, I approve with council's agreement.
Thank you. Does committee have any questions of Bob or Mr. Stickter? Seeing none, thank you. Then I'll move on to the next part of this, which is the public part of this meeting. Do we have anybody online to speak to this? We do not. There is nobody in the room to speak, so I'll go quickly through the second and third requests for people to speak. Seeing, hearing none, then I'll call the public part of this meeting closed and pass the matter back to committee for consideration. Councillor Coleman? Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Gatwood. Any further questions, comments? I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody, for that. On to the final item here.
Thank you very much.
8.4, 77 Maple Avenue South. Shannon, once more to you.
That's it. You hurdled that hurdle. Now you're on to the.
All right, this is a zoning bylaw amendment for lands located at 77 Maple Avenue South from owner Thomas Kamienski within the former township of Burford, and was required as a condition of the surplus farm dwelling severance application B7321AW. These subject lands are located on the west side of Maple Avenue South. They have an area of approximately 53 hectares and a frontage of approximately 332 meters along Maple Avenue South. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to rezone the retained lands from agriculture to agriculture with site-specific provision 9A-9 as the zone code in order to prohibit a dwelling. The proposed rezoning application is consistent with the provincial policy statement as well as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The subject lands are designated agriculture in the County of Brant official plan, and in my opinion are in conformity with the official plan, as the retained lands will continue to be farmed as part of a larger farming operation. No new residential lots are being created. The severed and retained lands have frontage along Maple Avenue South, and the minimum distance separation formula has been satisfied. These subject lands are currently zoned as agriculture and natural heritage within the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. Only the portion zoned as agriculture will be rezoned to agriculture with site-specific provision 9A-9 in order to prohibit a dwelling on the retained farm parcel. The portion of the lands that are zoned as natural heritage, shown as zone code NH, will continue to be zoned as natural heritage, as no dwelling is permitted to be built on lands zoned as natural heritage. The retained lands are maintaining the intent of the development standards for lands zoned as agriculture, and in my opinion, thereby meeting the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. At the time of writing the report, no public comments have been received. In my opinion, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, conforms to the County of Brant official plan, and meets the intent of the County of Brant zoning bylaw. I'm recommending approval of the rezoning application. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Does the committee have any questions of Shannon on this matter? Seeing none, thank you. I believe we have Davina Kamienski online. If Davina would like to speak, she's very welcome to do so at this point.
No, it's actually Tom Kaminsky, but no, I have no comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Then I'll move on to the public part of this meeting. Is there anybody that wishes to speak to this from the public? I think we have nobody online, nobody in the room, so I'm going to go quickly through second and third requests and assume nobody wishes to speak and close the public part of the meeting and pass the matter back to committee for consideration. Mayor Bailey?
Motion to approve, please.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor House, thank you. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you, everybody online. Thank you, Shannon, for your three items there. That brings us to section 9, which is consent items, of which we have none. Section 10, staff reports, we have none. Section 11, communications, none. Section 12, other business. I'll ask again if anybody wanted to raise any other business. There was none raised at the beginning. Seeing none, we'll move on then. We're going to now move into camera. And at this point, I will ask all non-council and non-staff members to depart. That was my written statement, but there's nobody in here to actually... You will move. Thank you. Councillor Ferrier moves that we go into camera. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Coleman, all those in favour? Thank you. We're now in camera. Yep. Okay, welcome back, everybody. We are now out of camera, which brings us to the last item of tonight's agenda, which is to talk about the next meeting, which will be Tuesday, June the 7th in this location. And I would like somebody to suggest we adjourn. Could somebody move that to adjourn? Steve Howes moves to